Hello students! In this video we're going to be expanding on what we learned in the rhythm tree by learning about more musical notation and the musical staff. So if you've never read music before, the musical staff is just this collection of 5 horizontal lines in which notes are drawn on. So when you see the notes, you'll see each of them has one of the symbols we saw in our rhythm tree, but to determine the pitch of that note, we're going to see where it's written on the musical staff. Like I said before, the staff is 5 lines, and we'll see that we can draw notes either on the lines or the spaces. So we'll see this would be a line, this would be a space. So before we can determine what pitches these lines and spaces correspond to, we have to check the clef. And a clef in music is a symbol that's written at the beginning of the musical staff that tells the performer what pitches their staff will correspond to, or it tells the performer the register of the staff. Pictured here are 2 of the most common clefs. Even if you've never read music before, you've probably seen these 2 clefs somewhere before. The first one is called the treble clef, or it's nicknamed the G clef. The second one is nicknamed the bass clef, or it's nicknamed the F clef. There are many other clefs, but these are the most common 2. And in this video, we're going to be learning how to identify the notes with the treble clef. So there are 2 tricks that we can use for this. The first trick is if the notes are on any of the lines. And there's an acronym sentence that just goes, "Every good bird does fly." So by looking at my picture here, I'm seeing that if the note is on a line, I can use that sentence and just count up. So let's say my pitch is on this 3rd line from the bottom. I would think about that sentence, "Every good bird," so I would know that is a B note. The second trick is if the notes are on any of the 4 spaces. And we'll see that in the treble clef, the 4 spaces spell the word face. So let's say we found a pitch and it's on the 3rd space from the bottom. I would count up that word face, F-A-C, and that's how I would determine that. What I want us to also notice here is that if you're not using that shortcut, we can just realize that every position up and down our staff is going to move 1 letter up or down our musical language. And of course, we've seen before, the musical language is just the first 7 letters of the English alphabet. So if I'm not using that trick, I'll know that my bottom line is an E, the very next space would be F, the very next position is G, next is A, next is B, so on and so forth. So on my next slide, I've got some actual music here. And you'll notice that we have the symbols that we've seen from our rhythm tree before. So of course this is starting with a quarter note, 2 eighth notes, and then 2 more quarter notes. So those symbols are telling me the rhythm somebody's going to use to perform them. But if I want to know what pitches they're playing, I can use the tricks we saw before. So I see that I have a treble clef at the beginning of my staff, so I know that I can use those 2 tricks. We're also seeing I have this fraction we saw on the rhythm tree PowerPoint, and I called that fraction the time signature. The most important thing I talked to us about with the time signature is that the top number is the number of beats. So this is a quadruple meter. So the first pitch I'm seeing is on a space, so I can count 3 spaces up. This would be F, A, C. So I would call that a C pitch. Then we're seeing I have another C, and then I have a line note. So again, for the line, I'm thinking every good bird does fly. So I'm going to count up that sentence on the lines. Every good bird does. So this would be a D pitch. So I've got a problem with the last note of this example. We'll see how the tricks that we learned stop at the top line. And we saw how the top line of the staff is an F note because of the word fly. So I told us before that every time you go up any position on your staff, you'll just go up the musical alphabet. So if the top line was an F note, then the very next position would be a G note. So in my next example, I'm seeing that I also have a treble clef, which means our two tricks will work again. I'm seeing we have this fraction, and the top number of the fraction is 4, telling me that we're still in the quadruple meter. So if I'm looking at my tricks, this would be F, A, E, G. So I want to see if you can independently find the names of these two pitches. So next there's going to be a question asking you to name each of these pitches. So try to store in your memory the pitches that you got. Finally, we're going to see how sometimes you'll need to extend your staff if you have pitches that are higher or lower than the staff. In this case, we'll use something called ledger lines. And as we can see from our picture here, these ledger lines are just lines that are written to expand the staff. They could go higher or they could go lower. So to figure out the notes of the ledger lines, we have to remember how every position up or down, whether it's a line or a space, is going up and down the musical alphabet. So our acronym sentence taught us that the very top line of the treble clef was the F note, which means the very next position will be G, and then the next one will be A. So this first ledger line would be an A. So now, the next note I'm seeing here is the space above the first ledger line. So that one would be B, because it's one position higher than that A that we figured out before. So knowing that this is B, that means the next note here would be C. And the next note would be D, because we're seeing how the C is on the line 2 ledger lines up, and the D is on the space 2 ledger lines up. So we've said these ledger lines can also go below the staff. So if we look at this one here below the staff, we're seeing how it's one line below the staff. So we knew that this note was E because every good bird does fly. So if I went one position lower than that, I'm on the space just under the staff. I could call that D because I'm now going down the musical alphabet. And now to find this line, I would think it's C, because every time we move down one of those positions, we're going up or down the musical alphabet. So see if you can independently find what this note is. That'll be your next question on the Z puzzle.